Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Douglas, welcome back to the podcast. Artists everywhere, thanks for tuning in.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going okay. I canceled Bayou City and I had some family things, had a little stuff I had to deal with, and I've just been now making work and putting all my eggs in the Fort Worth basket. So getting ready for that.
I know you've been putting in some long days getting work made.
I have, yeah. I'm working on some new stuff, and we'll see. So anyway, that's the end of the podcast. Nice talking to you guys. We'll see you next week.
Will's got to get to work, everyone.
All right, bye now.
I did get the throw up emoji when I tried to coordinate our preamble. That usually means I'm too busy. I can't do this.
That's exactly what it means. And to be honest, I was like, I looked back and I was like, well, I wonder what. I'm like, that's all I said to him. I just sent him a barf emoji and moved on.
That's all that needs to be said. I know what that means. I'm kind of in the same boat. We had to cancel Bayou City too because of this damn foot of mine, which we will not talk more than 30 seconds about. But physically, Winter Park wore me out, and we just had to come home and assess a game plan.
Right. So do you have one? Like, what's your game plan?
My game plan is get to the next weekend and figure it out then. Right.
I hear you. Yeah. I was watching one of Evan Reinheimer's great YouTube videos that he does for artists, kind of a similar spirit, I guess, that we do the podcast in, where he introduces his neighbors and does a little video. But I was watching him. He was talking about being grumpy on the road, and he mentions on there that it was his 9th show in a row. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. No wonder you're grumpy.
Well, it's a whole different beast. Different mediums, you can do that kind of a formula, but sure can't do that with painting, that's for sure. Can't do that with glass either.
Nope. I was talking to my wife about it just yesterday, feeling a little jealous of like photographers, that can do more shows than we can, but it comes with its own burden and it comes with its own stresses. It's like you can't be jealous about it. It's a completely different business.
It is. Just like we've talked on the podcast about people hating on jewelers. Jewelers have their side of it, just like all the different mediums. You have your positives and negatives. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if you're hating on jewelers, we've determined you're just wrong.
You're just wrong.
You're just, it turns out you're just an asshole. That's the thing.
Hey, man, check that toxic masculinity at the door, would you?
You texted me yesterday about, you just kind of made a joke, and I hadn't really been paying attention to the news. I mean, I watched the Oscars, but you're going to change the direction of the preamble and make it all about toxic masculinity. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you're just going to talk about me?
It's possible.
Yeah, right? Like, is this going to be an intervention?
No, it was just basically because that's all people were talking about. And by now it's going to be completely an old topic. But Well,
good news, Doug. If you don't like your neighbor, it's okay to go punch him in the face now.
It is.
I mean, I don't know. We get into all this stuff and people get heated, and it's not okay. It's not okay to get physical, Douglas. You can't get physical with people. It's not. Don't touch me. All right.
So Winter Park was good. The thing everyone talks about at Winter Park is the awards. So that's always a big deal. What generous award money they have going there.
Yeah, I was happy to see my friend David Figueroa win the Best in Show award.
It was awesome. Yeah.
His work is really heady. I've never honestly seen that particular kind of work move me like it does, and I was really happy to see him win. So I find it to be, it's very industrial, it's concrete and wood and metal, but I find it to be really moving and really thought-provoking work. So I was happy that the judges connected with that.
The title of the piece was Internal Structures. That's a $12,000 purchase award. And the description they gave about it, it talks about home life and trauma and all sorts of stuff. And you're right, there is a lot of deeper meaning to the piece when you look at it. And it's really exciting to see who they choose and who the big prize winners are. I'm happy for them.
I am too. I don't know. It's tough to get judges sometimes to spend the time and really take the time to connect with the piece, and it was nice to see that they did on this one. And I'm going to say this too. We're talking about awards. It's really funny to me when people when judges breeze through and they're like, they didn't even spend 5 seconds on my work, and it's like, well, I can understand that with jewelry. You have to get up there and look in the cases, and that's really obnoxious if you're not going to get up there and look down. But you can honestly, if the judge is looking for me, they can find me. I'm big. I'm right there. You can see me from across the street. A lot of us, they can. And if they're not looking for me, they're not looking for me. So I never really get my nose out of joint about that. It's like, well, you know what? I'd rather you just breeze by than to waste my time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is new this year, but typically when we've been at Winter Park, they've chosen you to be shown to the jury. They say, bring this piece down to be judged. Yeah. This year, they just said, you've been chosen and you get to choose. So that put a lot of pressure on people to be like, okay, which piece do I choose out of my booth and bring down to be juried? Yeah. So we had a few people I saw online asking for some advice or what the community kind of thought of their selections.
Right. Hey, here's a dumb question for you. Yeah. When they say purchase award, does that mean they buy the piece?
Yeah. So they buy the piece.
And
it used to be a $10,000 cap, but now it's $12,000 this year. It's up to $12,000.
So it's not like Gasparilla where they just give you a check. They take the art and they. So I mean, his work isn't cheap. I wonder if does that cover it?
One of the questions that they ask when you're pulled is, do you want to be considered for the Best in Show Purchase Award? Making it clear that you can decline it, but if you win the Best in Show, you are selling them that piece. That's the award. For $12,000. I don't know if your piece is worth $4,000 and they buy it for $12,000, or if it's people are showing only pieces in that price range for Best in Show. I don't know how that works.
I'm going to show them a $2,000 piece, and I'm going to win. You just bought a $2,000 piece for $12,000. Nah, whatever. Okay, cool. Moving on. Man, I was really missing showing in Florida this year, so we'll see what happens next time.
And here it is. It made a business decision not to go, and here it is. The season is wrapped up, and we're already into April here and on the road to Texas. It's like time is just moving on like crazy.
Like the sands in an hourglass.
I began the whole van Tetris yesterday because I'm trying already because I am trying like hell not to take the trailer to Fort Worth. First of all, it's a small little booth. I mean, really, there's no need for me to do that. But I'm having to Marie Kondo everything. I'm pulling everything out of the trailer. I take a look at it. Does it spark joy? No, it's not that. Will I use this clothespin clamp? No, I won't. It doesn't come. You know what I mean? It's basically...
My bag of zip ties no longer brings me joy. Oh, man. Yeah, I hear you. I am going to... I'm not going to start packing until Monday. I don't think. I've got a lot to do. I actually have to bring a trailer. I was kind of making fun of you for having to do that, but I have to bring one.
Sure.
I ended up selling a commission bigger panels than the woman that makes the panels can handle. So I had to go find somebody. And I remember going to Fairhope, Alabama and doing an art show years ago. And I always keep my cards. And I've kept this guy's card. And I really liked this guy. And the guy was like, well, oddly, I just sold my business. So he sold his business to this couple in Alabama. Really interesting people. It's Alabama art panels. One woman, part of the partnership, runs a dog washing business. The other guy he builds all of the panels, and he got in a bad motorcycle accident and lost his leg.
Jesus.
Bought a fishing boat, went down to Florida. You were talking about getting bored at the beach. This guy got bored on his fishing boat, decided he wanted to do something. So instead of running construction, he bought this panel business from this other guy. So I'm his very first client, and he's awesome. He's real Southern. He's like, man, I was thinking about just making 9x12s and things people do their paintings on. And I just wanted to do it like that. And I'm like, are you set up to do 9 feet by 6 feet? He's like, man, I mean, if you're paying me. So
no, but this is all just a gift.
Right. I mean, it's amazing, though. These guys, I've seen the panels. They're incredible. So there's a new panel maker on the scene now. Alabama Art Panels. I totally vouch for these people. They're incredible.
Cool. Awesome.
So anyway, the long story being, I'm going to take my trailer after Fort Worth and drive to Alabama and pick these suckers up.
So this card you kept, was it actually on paper, or was this just stored somewhere in the cloud on your phone like a photo of a card?
No, my wallet. I got the worst case of dad wallet you've ever seen. It's about 4.5 inches thick.
Oh, my God.
I've got back problems because of this wallet. I can't even sit down.
All right. I think it's even harder to keep track of shit when it's on your phone on a digital cloud than just on a slip of paper at the bottom of a drawer somewhere.
Okay, Grandpa. So, yeah, I've just been making work for Fort Worth, trying to get ready. This is it's going to be a big run. I've got Fort Worth, then Artisphere, and Old Town, and I'm trying to make all the work for those 3 in a row kind of right now, which is why my season hasn't started until April.
Yeah. Hey, I was looking on social media lately, and I saw Tommy Spake, glassblower, over in Italy.
Yeah. I love him.
Yeah, he was doing, him and his family were traveling through Italy, and it took me back to, and we did basically the same tour. Have you done any of that? Have you done any overseas trips or anything that's inspired your work or anything like that over the years?
Nope.
No.
I like to stay in America because I'm American.
when we went to Italy, it wasn't so much getting inspired to do particular like glass style. It was more like the artist's life, because we backpacked through Italy, and we were just youngins. We were like, 24, 25 years old. And we did the old fashioned Rick Steves guidebook. We got our airline ticket in and out. And we read this little guidebook, and we showed up in the Cinque Terre and looked for Steve in the middle of the square, and he pointed us to a pension to go to. And it was just a great experience. But what it did for us was it really set us on the course of this life that we're living, which is just letting it unfold and kind of like doing things one step at a time. And it seemed like being in a different culture like that we learned something that was so uniquely different than America, where here we're so externally motivated by everything. And over there, it's like kind of like living the simple life in a way. Yeah. And I've been trying to go back to that in my head because of the brakes being thrown here on my foot. It can really put you into a tailspin when I'm just so used to working hard every day and just, when we did this podcast, saying, we're not going to be on that treadmill anymore. I'm getting off of that treadmill. In July, I got back on that treadmill full force. Anyway, that whole thing about him going to Italy made me come back to that.
Makes you feel like you're drawing that, try to catch some of that inspiration again? Is that what you're talking about?
Just taking me back to that time and just being like, you know what? I don't have to plan this whole year out. I can just like go to the next show. How am I feeling? I got through it. This business gets hard when we're trying to book these shows 6 months in advance. We're planning an entire frickin' year.
Yeah, I don't know how exactly I can break that treadmill, but I know exactly what you mean. I really do find myself listening to that kind of Daryl Thetford in my head.
Yeah.
Try to slow it down, or at least put my energy where it's important.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned being jealous of like Evan being able to do 9 shows in a row. I'm really not. Mm-hmm. Thank God I can't do 9 shows in a row. I remember doing the Oklahoma City show one year. And by the 7th day of that grueling experience, I was saying some really nasty things to people, and
it's hard.
It's just too much. So I'm glad I don't know. I'm putting my energy where I think it's the most important. And we'll focus that way. I've cut some shows that have been really hard to cut from my schedule.
Oh, I know.
That I'll probably revisit later down the road. I'm not doing Des Moines this year, and that kind of breaks my heart a little bit. I love the people that run that show. It's kind of a family atmosphere almost, but I'm looking at where my production is and where my travel schedule meets, and it just doesn't meet.
Well, you made a hard decision to say, don't do Florida. And I mean, I shouldn't say hard decision, but it was a decision that you had to kind of like commit to, Yeah. And then while you're in it, any of us would be thinking, should I have made that decision or shouldn't have I? And seeing the people down there, the sales and what people are talking about, and just committing to this April thing. And you're just like firing on all cylinders with getting a body of work for the next 3 months. And I'm glad you got your new studio, because it seems like that's really, really working for you. It's getting you in the zone where you need to be.
Yeah, I'm totally in the zone right now. And, my wife is going down to Fiesta. I'm going to have, cool. I can work even stupider hours as long as I take care of the dogs.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. You can put in those long days if you need to or want to.
Well, like last night I woke up. Yeah, I woke up last night at about 4:00, which is probably your typical getting up time, you maniac.
Nope, not anymore. Nope.
No. Okay. But I looked at the clock and I was like, God, I'm awake. And that's the only time I actually missed having the studio in the house, because I would have I'd gotten up and gone down the hall, but I'm much more productive in my own space.
Yeah. So one of the things that's been interesting me over the last year on the podcast, and I've talked to a couple of people like Chris Dahlquist or Eric Lee, is about these bigger projects that artists are doing, these commissions, these big installations like we've done at the museum or like we did for Capitol Lakes Retirement Home. And so I've talked to Justin, who he's on the podcast today. He's also getting pushed in that direction. He's doing some pretty big, massive work for hotels and some really big pieces and incredible pieces. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that when you transition from not fully away from the collector who wants something for their mantle, but also like incorporating into some bigger type projects. And so it was kind of a fun conversation that we had, just thinking about our work differently in different settings.
Yeah, when you work larger, to me, it has been really freeing. Mm-hmm. I like working larger. When I transitioned to larger pieces, and this will make you insane being a glass blower, I just started using bigger brushes. Oh. Like, well, I've been using a number 2. What if I use a number 12? Oh. And it's like, oh man, and it becomes a lot more gestural. I've been really getting down into it. So it's been cool to work larger for me. And I like the way that has an influence on my work. And I had a client in 2020 that wanted to do a big triptych, which I'm getting ready to do another one now, but because he saw his friends. And,
so this came from that?
If I can be, awesome. If I can be the giant triptych guy in that neighborhood, and that I've got a designer that I work with, that, man, there was a talk on social just now about designers and what your designer cut is, and some people are like, nope, no cut. I don't do it at all. I'm like, okay, totally respect that. My take, and the reason I'm giving, like, this lady gets 30%, that there is no way, like, there is no way in hell they're letting me in the gate. There's no way they're going to come see me at a street show. There's no way I'm getting into this $12 million house. Minimum. I mean, this is like, we're talking about like a 9,000 square foot house that's ski in, ski out in the biggest ski resort in the United States. And it's like, there's no way I'm getting in the security gate without this designer. That's where she's getting her 30%.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it's different across different mediums and the scale of work that you're doing and that sort of thing, for sure. I mean, at least for glass vessel makers, it's usually that interior designer who found one piece that fits in their design that they want to put on a mantle, and they want a discount on it, even though they're getting. You could approach these people and still make that sale as a glassmaker. But working in what you're describing, that's where you have to kind of take all of the factors into account. I saw a talk back when Chihuly first came on the scene in the 90s, and I never in a million years thought we'd be doing installations, but at that time when I was a student and we had, we're going through the line to have him sign the books and all that kind of stuff, one of the things we heard him say in his talk, he was less interested in making a piece for somebody to look at or an object. He was more interested in what does his work do to an environment and how does he change an environment. And that was the point when he was hanging chandeliers over the canals in Venice. And so, I mean, of course, everybody has seen his collections and his big assemblages and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so when we were approached at one point to do our first one, this was for the Museum of Wisconsin Art, the collector asked us, they said, we want you to make something you can see from a mile away. my first thought was, well, what they want is a Chihuly, and we're not going to do a Chihuly because we're not Chihuly. Why would we do a Chihuly, especially for a museum? But that isn't what he was asking. He was actually asking, what would we do with it? Mm-hmm. And we put some time and thought into it. And aside from the design, I'm not interested in discussing how we came about the design. It added all of the other complexities to it that I would have never imagined I'd be stepping into. Stuff like working with architects to make sure the thing doesn't come down on people's heads.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with that right now. I've got a phone call with an architect right now. These panels that I was talking about earlier in the show.
Sure.
Each one of them is 75 pounds.
Oh, right.
So how you can't hang that shit on sheetrock.
Yeah. Well, we're talking thousands of pounds I was dealing with for this installation. So when I've gotten into the 2 or 3 major projects that we've done, I've made it imperative that I am not taking responsibility for it, that I'm turning my design over to their architects so their architects can do whatever needs to be done with weight specifications, load bearing, and coming up with the problem solving on their end. And then I also get lawyers involved so that we have signed off documents that absolve us from any of that kind of stuff. Stepping into that was a whole new realm for me,
right?
That I was happy to do and excited to do, but it is something that you don't have to deal with when you're making a 18-inch vessel to sit on somebody's mantle.
That's why I hired for this big thing. The first time I installed it, I hired an art installer. So he's the one that's insured. I know my work is going to, it's going to hold together. It's not going to fall apart and fall on somebody's head. But if it falls off the wall, it's on that guy. He hung it. He's the one that's bonded and insured, not me. So I'm not signing off on anything. I've passed the buck on that one.
Yeah,
I dig what you're saying. It's
find the expert. Find the one who knows, who's the expert in their field. Let them do their part. Reach out to them as a resource. One of the things that I really jived with when Chris Dahlquist was on last season, she talked about how artist entrepreneurs, they're not typically skilled in every aspect of what they need to do, but they're comfortable and they are good at assessing who the right people are to reach out to do just like what we're describing. Lawyer who's going to protect us if the contract falls through financially, or the lawyer is going to protect us from liability if somebody gets hurt. They think about the things we wouldn't think about, or the architect who's going to actually make it stay together on the ceiling. So anyway. And
I don't know that we all are. I mean, I certainly am not, but I'm getting into that this past couple of years where I feel like I'm in a spot where I'm like, you know what? I'd rather pay the guy to do the thing than do the thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to drive. Like, I do know artists that, like my boy Greg Turco, who will do like a custom tour thing with his custom work. And then he'll go and deliver all of his stuff and do a big lap around the U.S. But I'm like, I like that. That works for him. For me, I'm like, okay, I've started using those services where I'm like, hey, white glove this thing to New York. I don't want to pack it and worry about it getting dropped. You do it. You're insured, deal with the art installer. Let him hang it and be like, hey, this piece is warped. What do I do with the warped piece? And I'm like, that art installer that I hired back in Utah, he taught me how to deal with it. He taught me how to lock it to the wall so it's not warped anymore. I'm like, well, I wouldn't have thought of that, So I'm all for hiring the right human for the job.
For sure. So that's what I was interested about in talking to Justin this week. And he did just that. He's learning new materials. He's reaching out to new resources. He's solving problems. And he has found himself in the past several years shifting out of the mode that he's been in for most of his career. So it was really exciting to hear from him, hear his voice, and hear him talk about the new stuff he's been working on.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've always admired Justin. It's been incredible to see the transition that his work has taken over the years. It's an incredible talk, and I just want people to hear it. Let's get right into it.
All right, here's Justin Teilhet from Yellow Springs, Ohio. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
You know, Doug, I was sitting down and talking with my wife yesterday. She had just come in from her studio and she was complaining. One of the big shows, they decided to do a do-it-yourself, reinvent the wheel application.
Hate that so much.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's like typically an application that would take you 2 minutes on Zap. All of a sudden, it's going to take you an hour and a half to reformat all of your images to their specifications. It just made me think about how easy applying with Zap is.
You just click a few buttons, you've got your 1920s all formatted, and you are good to go.
Exactly. So I personally appreciate what Zap is doing, and thanks for not making us reinvent the wheel every single week like we used to have to do.
Man, thanks for bearing with me. I apologize. I'm so hard to deal with. I'm getting the feeling that everyone's starting to feel that way because it's tough for me to get back to everything. But I'm glad it worked out.
I actually feel like I need to start out each of these episodes with apologizing to everybody because you're not alone. I mean, we are all just like feet to the fire right now. We are all running at a speed that is insane and not sustainable. So I really appreciate you taking some time away from your valuable work to talk to us today.
That's good stuff. Good stuff.
It's good. Well, let's start off and talk about what you do. What do you make?
Oh, well, that's a long story. Actually, what I make right now, you mean?
Yeah. Well, what's your medium? Let's talk about your medium first of all.
Okay. Well, I was up until sunrise working on a piece that's been commissioned that is actually the raw material is wood. So, you know, I guess these days I'm having to get used to the concept of being a mixed media artist.
Wow. I mean, a lot of your friends, a lot of your peers out there have always known you as a porcelain artist, but are you branching off into different mediums?
Well, you know, I've been with clay, believe it or not, since I was 5. So I did a long stretch in my youth of working with clay, you know, on a, of course, non-professional level, and then went into it really full time in the mid 90s and was a potter. I never really had a line of functional work per se. I didn't do dinnerware, things like that, but more vessel oriented pieces, visual pieces. And I taught for a short bit. I taught sculpture at Stivers School for the Arts in Dayton, Ohio. And I mean, they had a great ceramics facility next door, and they asked me to teach. And I said, that sounds great, but I just don't want to teach ceramics. You know, I get up in the morning, I make ceramics, I spend the evening talking to people about ceramics, and then I travel around showing the ceramics, and then I make more ceramics. You know, let me be in a different studio. So I taught sculpture, and our studio there was primarily steel, plaster, concrete, mixed media, wood, all sorts of things. And it really sort of allowed me to branch out just creatively in my own time. It was a departure almost.
So with teaching sculpture, it was also allowing you to experiment with new materials and kind of grow in your own sense as an artist? Yeah,
I suppose so. I mean, as I taught, I learned a lot about materials and methods. But, you know, as I was doing that, I was still doing ceramics. So when I showed work under my own representation, it was applied in the field of ceramics. So everything that I did and showed, whether it was sculptural or anything else, it was still fired clay. 6 years ago or so, I was doing some work for a designer that was placing my work around. And I showed her a recent piece that I had done, and they ended up ordering, you know, a huge one of this new style. It's about 15 feet long. And that sort of launched into this next body of work. It really came from my teaching. You know, I was teaching all these lessons at some points in time, sculptors that were new to it, beginners. And so I always started in the beginning with principles of design, starting with imitation and then exaggeration and repetition and progression and tension and juxtaposition. And, you know, I was having a lot of fun with it too.
So these are principles that were always important to you in the designing of your work.
Exactly.
I mean, even back when you were doing vessels as primarily what you would show at a show.
Right.
It was rarely a single piece. I mean, obviously you'd sell a
Right.
piece individually, but they were often displayed as sets, as collections, and
Right.
how those different forms worked together,
Exactly.
which tied into the themes you're describing here.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like a conversation, between the objects. I was teaching this methodology and exploring it with students, and then going right back into my studio practice that I had developed and had been going on for, nearly decades. So when I began to apply my own lessons to my work, just starting with basic principles, repetition, and using repetition as the palette, and density as my shades, so I could compose an image or a piece based on these pretty simple things. It was a slower time around then. Shows and galleries were okay, but it was kind of a hold steady period. I had more time to experiment, and that's where that work came from.
So the wall piece that you did,
Yeah,
that this designer identified as something that they would want to expand upon, was that you taking your lesson that you're saying?
yes.
And then the demand was met and it was able to then kind of funnel into a bigger scale?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And after that, the mixed media started because I had done a small piece. It was about 12 inches by 28 inches or something. It's a small piece to hang on the wall. And I had done it in porcelain out of hundreds of linear elements that were sculpted with curves. When they all went together, it created a composition. Someone saw that in a photograph. And of course, this, when you're looking at a picture of your work, first question is, well, how big is it? It might be as big as a house. It might fit in my pocket. I'm just not sure. There's no context.
Exactly.
So they saw this piece and they said, hey, that's great. We want one of those. We need it 11 feet long by 5 feet wide. And I said to them that the practicality of doing this in porcelain it's just over the top. We'd be using pieces that are 5 feet long, fired without any bows or ripples or any, just technically it became impossible, but I knew what they wanted. I knew the design that they wanted. And I said, but, I can reproduce this piece in enameled wood. It's going to have the same, visually, you won't know a difference, but then it becomes practical. So I became a woodworker to do this piece. It's in Hawaii now.
When they first requested that and you were like, well, this isn't going to work in ceramics.
Yeah.
Did you have that moment where you were like, wait a minute, am I kind of leaving this material behind that I've just been so connected to my whole career?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I tend to look at the other side. I get so excited about tools and materials, getting to play with something new that I didn't at that moment really look back. Though the other materials, metal, wood, things like that, are still a small part, of what I do. These larger wall compositions that I'm doing, though I'm working on a wooden one now, they're still primarily clay. I mean, they're framed, but yeah, it's still a small part, but I am enjoying it. The photographs of that piece, of course, led to other ones in that style. I have realized, though, that to answer your question a little bit more deeply, that I threw my first pot when I was 5. And that's a different story, but I had never gone more than a few months in like 40 years without throwing a pot.
I feel you on that. I'm feeling the same way. I'm like kind of like stepping into your shoes and I'm thinking, okay, what if I started considering a series or something that was a departure from glass, and I start getting this feeling like, sad inside, like
right,
but also exciting. It sounds like it's exciting because you've got this puzzle to solve that's opening new doors.
It is, and I it's been a while since I've sat at the wheel. It's been a year probably since I really sat down and did a good session. I thought that would be huge, but it hasn't been, and I think that what it boils down to is fingers wiggling. As long as I've got some material in front of me to manipulate somehow, then that part of my brain's satisfied. The connection to the wheel was more, I guess it was more emotional than it was really connected to a need to do that particular material in that particular manner.
Do you think it's also kind of getting out of the comfort zone? Like, we work so much with a material for years, 20, 30, I mean, your case, since you were a little kid. And we feel like we know this material. There's still new things to learn with it. But for the most part, we feel like pretty good with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then to step away from that and be like, okay, now, well, I'm having to solve new puzzles with wood or new puzzles with metal. And you get in a vulnerable place of having to do that rediscovery of what am I doing? Am I out of my element here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes. That's why I was up till the sun came up, I don't know. There's something, I guess, inherently satisfying about that need to solve that puzzle. I mean, it's hell when it's happening, but that 10 minutes we all get at some point in time to sit across the room by ourselves, staring at that thing that we just finished, and it's done. And I remember when that piece broke off, or I remember when that went awry, but now here I am, it's realized that moment, is what we're after.
The satisfaction of like, I didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out, but I got to the other side of it, and then the discoveries that come from it. And we're still bringing the years of experience of being an artist, of artistic design and principles and all that sorts of things to new material. So it's not like we're coming into a new material like as beginners or anything, even though we feel like beginners when we start this stuff.
Yeah. Yes. That's what's one of the great things about the way we've gone about it. We've all gone about it from so many different directions, and it takes all those directions to make it work. But so oftentimes we are in the company of our peers. And that's when you realize, like, you can't just tiptoe through this. I mean, people are amazing at what they do. And seeing that on a regular basis, it really, I often feel like the best I can do is be on par with these people, that I'm surrounded with on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, whatever it is. This artwork that I see by these people that are, it's astounding, and just to be able to stay on par with that is what I think challenges me to keep going with it.
Justin, we've talked to so many people over the last year. And some people who I have looked up to, you included. I just had a talk with Tony Cray that's going to air next week. And
what a guy.
Yeah, what a guy. But the common thread amongst all of these great artists is this feeling of feeling a little bit insecure about the company we're among, we don't feel as good as the best among us or whatever. And then, but those folks are feeling the same. So I think we are all kind of holding each other to a higher standard. We all want to attain the best that we can be. And that's good. I mean, maybe that's one thing about this community that we were in, is it is really pushing us all to high standards and working higher, not imposing it onto other people, but from an internal place.
Sure. No. Yeah, I agree. The minute that my work is good enough, I guess I'm done. Is that, so there's always a lot of room to grow. Yeah. Bob Dylan said, never stop becoming and you'll probably be okay.
Wow.
And that's good words. I mean, if we can achieve and we can achieve with our abilities. And as long as we have something to chase, I think we're going to be okay.
I thought I'd heard every Dylan quote there is. My dad's a huge Dylan fan, and he's always throwing Dylan lines at me. I've never heard that one. That's great. I love it.
Well, he just came up with a new one 10 minutes ago, so it's hard to keep up.
It's hard to keep up with a great one like that. So you come up with this idea to try something new with the wall pieces, and you put it out there. We sometimes have a vision of where we think something's going to go, and you experienced something that is a surprise. Like the work got pushed in a direction from an external influence, from a collector, from a designer who had visions for where your work could go, and you're kind of following that. Can you talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah. So I looked at clay as a material to place into whatever mode I needed it for. And vessels were the mode that I was in for so long. And that was all about form. And that form, I could always break down into a line. I mean, I had these basic silhouettes. And so these lines were really thought out. And keeping that in mind, when I was asked to do a piece to hang on a wall, I needed a focal point of the piece. So I went back to that kind of humble line.
Yeah.
I tell people a lot of times I'm a failed minimalist. I strive to show something interesting through simplicity. That is super challenging because, more is, it becomes other things. But I tried to focus on just that simple line. And from that, using a basic design principle that I had taught, repetition, I was able to show this line and accentuate it through the density of the material that I used. Now, that's a whole lot of big descriptive words, but basically in areas that I wanted to be darker, deeper, I used heavier density of smaller parts. And we're talking, 10,000, tens of thousands of small ceramic parts that were handmade and fired and then assembled into resin underneath. And with that as my palette, I was able to do some monochromatic pieces, to start a large monochromatic piece that focused on a simple line movement in the gross form, seeing the overall, but then on a more intimate look, seeing these thousands of parts, making all of this texture and detail that sort of brings them to life. But still going monochromatic. They're the first one I did was black. It's a 5 by 15 foot black wall hanging.
Yeah.
And you can see those on Instagram. And,
believe me, I've gone deep into your Instagram. A lot of great stuff on there.
It's 90% work and a couple pictures of my dog. So it's
and a demolition of a studio here and there.
That's right. I did put the bulldozer knocking over the old building. That's right. Yeah, I'm in my new studio now. So we tore the old building down, one of the old buildings down, and built a new facility that I had been, sort of dreaming about for 20 years.
I got to say, it obviously looked like a building that could use some bulldozing and renovating. However, I'm sure there was still that moment when the bulldozer took it down and was like, wait a minute, stop. I'm not too sure about that.
Undo. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
That was I used that building that you saw get pulled down 15 years, 20 years, something like that. It was where so when I got started, my mother was a painter. So in high school and as a youth, like I said, I was throwing pots when I was pretty young. I liked the creative fields. I didn't really find a place in them in any sort of official capacity. I was sort of aloof in school and, whatever, but I love to draw. I love to paint. My mother was a painter. I was also around it. My folks owned a picture frame shop. So I grew up around, just looking at people's paintings and prints and everything else that they'd bring in and was exposed to that early on. But in high school, I started a family pretty early on and have a great son now. He's all grown up and I'm real proud of him because he's kind of followed in my footsteps and gone into the creative fields himself.
Cool.
Even after watching and seeing how difficult it is, but he did it. So after that, I wanted to go into a creative field, but felt really limited on what I could do that would actually be a living. So I went into design, graphic design, illustration.
Was the arts in high school just stuff you were dabbling in, or were you taking art classes or anything like that?
Yeah, I was. I did. I was lucky. I had a really good art department at the school that I went to. They had different departments within it. So they had a ceramic studio. So you take ceramics 1, 2, and 3, and drawing 1, 2, and 3, and painting 1, 2, and 3, and photography, and separate it up, not just a general art classes. And I had gone through all those classes and done pretty well. I had sort of taken a gap my high school career from working in clay very much. I was just too cool for it. You know, I had that, I was like, I had been doing this art thing since I was a little kid and, you know, whatever. I don't know, something was wrong with me. So one day, I think I was a senior at the time, early on, and I was in a painting class, and I'm painting an oil painting, and I kind of look around the corner and I see this room full of these potter's wheels and all these people on them just doing it wrong. And I thought, well, now wait, I know how to do that.
Come on.
And so I just put my paintbrush down, and we had pretty cool art instructors there. They were open-minded as long as we were doing good work. And I sort of meandered over there and started throwing pots. And it was amazing. I mean, I had so much fun with it, and instantly just kind of shifted all my focus to that area of high school. But at the time, I mean, I had no concept that this was something I could pursue.
Right. It was, certainly. You were just in the moment with it. I mean,
yeah.
It was just so dang fun to get your hands in there and squish it with your fingers and turn it into something that was exciting.
Making stuff. So I got back into it a little bit and sort of set up a wheel, you know, at home and was doing that. And then went to a quick 2-year program and did graphic design and illustration. And I did a lot of pen and ink drawings, things like that.
Well, let me ask you, because, you know, you have your mother is an artist by nature and had the frame shop and whatnot. Was the influence from your folks to pursue a more professional type career, or was it to explore the arts since they already kind of had that sensibility about them?
They were great. They were sensibly encouraging because they knew that the arts were a legit path. They didn't think it was outlandish, and yet they knew the pitfalls of it and the difficulties of it. They knew I had a young family, you know, and that I needed to do something. So the design field was a way that I could do that, you know, have a job and 401k and all that stuff. Right. I lasted about 2 years.
Okay.
I could
in the program or as a professional after the program?
Professionally.
Okay. So you made it through the whole graphic program.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, got me a suit, went into a job interview with a big portportfolio. And,
well, that's an image. I want everyone to step back and visualize that one.
I'll wear it to the next show.
Do you have the ponytail back then too?
I did totally. And one of my instructors was just, she couldn't handle it, but I kept it. And still, anyway. So, you know, I lasted in the field about 2 years and I just couldn't, I hated it. I mean, I was using my hands, I was using any creative ability that I could muster, but it just was a field that wasn't for me. It was trying to interpret other people's visions, whether they were reality or not. I had set up a wheel and a little electric kiln in my garage. We had an apartment, and I live in this cool little town in Ohio called Yellow Springs. And twice a year they have this street fair. It ain't an art fair. It's a hairy street fair, you know, and it's anything goes. It's the greatest. It's a pretty interesting little deal. But and it's turned into something else. But so this was like in the late 90s. Okay. And I was kind of floundering a little bit. I knew I hated my job. I knew I loved clay. I knew I loved making stuff out of stuff. Yeah. And I got a booth down at this street fair and, you know, had all my little ceramics, and I was probably, I would have been 20 the early 20s. And, you know, I think I made like $600. Right. And man, my head exploded.
That was enough, right?
I was done, man. I am checking out and doing this.
Yes.
And then, you know, it was a tough road. So in ceramics, I won't get too technical, but, you know, I didn't really have anything. I certainly didn't have a gas kiln or anything like that. But I got a dog cage. I lined it with ceramic fiber. I put some handles on it. Boom, man, I'm a raku potter. You know, that's something I can do.
I can't even tell you how many pizza ovens glass artists have turned into little things. You know, you find you just make stuff work. You put it together.
And I was a raku potter for 8 years, something like that. I don't know. Then I built my first gas kiln and started doing stoneware. I focused on wood ash glazes, very textural surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then I jackhammered that one out and put a kiln in that I had gotten from a company in California that was more like a scientific instrument than a kiln. And that's what allowed me to do a lot of the porcelain that I was doing with the copper reds and celadons and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Which is what I had been doing for 10 years almost when I started doing the more sculptural wall installations. And then, of course, now they've led into the mixed media. And that's the little category under my name now.
Is mixed media. So when you apply to, are you still doing the fairs like that you
I do a couple. I do a couple. About 10 years ago or so, I was doing just art fairs.
Yeah. And
I had a gallery in Columbus, Ohio that was representing me, and she took my work to some of the shows, SOFA and things like that.
Oh, great.
And then I was doing shows myself. I fell into this kind of hybrid, this different thing. It was Architectural Digest puts on a design show in New York.
Yeah.
And I was invited to do that. And it was the hugest expense I had ever seen in my career, but bit the bullet and did it anyway. And connected with a lot of designers that were placing work in public spaces and in, large residences.
This is an avenue that I'm hearing more from other artists who are working like you. And I find it interesting that this is something that has been around. It's not new, but it is something that is like a crossover to a different level or a different style of selling work that I'm really currently really interested in. So,
well, unfortunately, after a long run and an amazing show, that show is no longer.
Okay.
It was on Pier 94, and Pier 94 began to sink into the Hudson, and there was a lot more and don't ask me about the details, but that show is no longer. That slowed me down when I started doing that. And I did it for about 10 years. I was able to not have to do so many fairs, and kind of was pretty lucky. I had some pretty good luck getting into some things and was able to pare it down. I now have a gallery that I'm working with that's in California, and they've been taking the work to some of the shows. They had it before COVID. They had it at Art Miami in 2019 and plans on going back there this year. But I'm still doing, to make a short answer long, I am still doing some shows. I have a soft spot for Cherry Creek. I love Denver. I did it last year and was lucky enough to win an award. So I'm back in there. Really, really looking forward to that one.
So you're in a place where you can be selective about which ones you choose and which ones you put your energy and your efforts into, because you've got this other kind of aspect of your business that has really good attention that is funneling in some revenue.
Yeah, well, when I'm lucky, I can be selective, and I've been kind of lucky, and we'll see what happens next. But I don't know what is going on right now, but I am just over the top swamped. I'm getting nearly daily calls, it seems like, with inquiries to work and projects, and it's good. It's good. I'll take it.
Are these all like private collectors who they see a friend and they're like, I love what's in their house and now I want it? Or is this coming from a designer that's placing you in corporate places? Or is it all of it?
Well, it's a little bit of everything. Right now I am getting a lot of calls from individuals that have either seen the work or somehow seen the work and want a piece for themselves.
Like they saw it on Viceland, for example, and they're like, I got to have that piece.
Yeah. If anyone has 2 Chainz's number, please, because I can work him a deal out. He doesn't have to steal the piece.
That was pretty funny. I was watching that clip. They were joking about stealing your piece. Tell us about that clip and how it even came to be.
Okay, so it's kind of a full circle. That we were talking about one of the early ones I did. That was this large black wall installation in porcelain, 15 feet by 5 feet. It was one of my first public space commissions, and it went to the Palms Casino in Las Vegas.
Wow.
I went to do the installation with the installers and was there for a few days myself. It was a pretty nice place, but it wasn't in a public space. It wasn't in the lobby or anything like that. They had these 3 they called them sky suites, I think. Anyway, they were just stupefying. I mean, each room had an elevator. Each room was 2 stories, had its own pool, like a hot tub that cantilevered out the side of the building over Vegas, 25 stories up or whatever. And just craziness. Like there was a bar with, I think, 21 seats just in, and this is in the room.
Yeah.
Anyhow. So that's what they got this large piece for that room, and I put it in there. And then, I don't know, a few months later, I get a strange letter from some production company in Brooklyn saying, will you sign off on this? It's possibly going to be used in a TV production.
All right.
And I'm thinking like maybe some reality show or something where like it's just you can maybe see a corner of it in the background or whatever. I didn't care. I signed it and sent it back. And I was telling my son about it. And I was saying that piece might show up in some kind of TV show. And my son jokingly said, yeah, it should be on Most Expensivest. Right, which is this Viceland show with 2 Chainz as a host where he just goes and points out outlandish things that people are spending their money on. It's a little tongue in cheek. I mean, They definitely have fun with the idiocy of some of the grandeur that goes on out there. But anyway, and I laughed and I thought, yeah, that's pretty funny. Well, so it turns out that was the show.
That is hilarious. He was spot on with it.
And they were doing a spot on the most expensive hotel suite in Las Vegas. And it happened to be this one.
Wow.
And so he's sitting there on this couch in the room having this interview with this, guy.
Yeah.
In a purple suit. He's asking him about different things in the room. And he points back to the piece and he says, I'm interested in this one now, and says something about maybe, well, you guys aren't looking something. And they actually do a full blown cutaway animation of like 2 Chainz and this art heist where he goes in and he rips the piece off and like is running down the hallway. It's outrageous.
And it's all on your work. It's a lot of piece you made.
I saw it on TV. I didn't even know about it or anything.
Yeah.
Someone called me and said, hey man, turn your TV on. Yeah. So that was, and that's everyone gets their, 15. So there you go.
Yeah. Right.
That was good times. Good times.
That's awesome.
But that was through a consultant, an art consultant, that had seen my work, that I've worked with a good bit. They're great folks.
Well, it makes me think, you said something earlier, your graphic design days, you said you lasted 2 years and you felt like the majority of your job was to realize somebody else's vision and try and make, creatively make happen what they want happen for them. But I kind of think a little bit, you created your wall pieces and you created them in a smaller scale, but now the demand is big and they come to you and they say, well, we want this a 15-footer. And you go, well, we can't actually do it in clay. And you come up with a new way to do it. But you are doing just that, what I'm describing. You're realizing these visions that people have dreamed up, and you can infuse your design element into that scale, and you're solving those problems. So maybe that technique or that whatever is bringing you full circle and coming back to those early days.
There's definitely an element of that. And I definitely work with people often to see what their sensibility is, what it is that they're looking for. And the thing that was so frustrating about working in the design field was I would work with people all the time that thought they knew what they wanted. They had this imaginary thing that was perfect and pristine in their head, but it really doesn't exist. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it, but they think it's there. Trying to interpret that was always real difficult. With what I do now, the great thing is that up front, the first part of the job is a trust issue, where I didn't have that in the other field, where now I can show somebody some examples of my work and let them know, hey, if you like my work, I'm going to make sure you're happy. You don't have to have an idea and tell me how you'd like it to be. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm here.
I'm totally following you. I had a collector last year in Madison who came into our booth, and they've been buying from us for years. And they had just bought a house in Florida and a second home, and they had a 30-foot wall by a 17-foot wall, and she's trying to draw out for me what she wants us to do for her.
Right.
And I said, this is great, but I want you to know something, that I'd be happy to consider, what you're doing here. And there's something about our work that you like. Why don't you just give us an opportunity to present you with something we would do with it and see what you think about it. You don't have to design it. We're not just the creator of your vision. We're also the creator of a vision that you may like.
Right.
And that started us on a really great starting ground of this project, which we're working on right now to finish. So that just resonated what you were saying about that.
That's why we do what we do. Trying to mesh different visions isn't always the best method for the best work.
But it sounds to me like those experiences help clarify and help solidify how you work with people. I mean, now you're saying it almost seems like getting into these projects, there is that level of trust. And then you kind of know how to channel it down that lane so that ultimately you can get the collector to the end result of what they're wanting without it being like this kind of wrestling match of, but I want it in this and I want it in that and all of the details that they think they need or want.
Right. Yeah, obviously size of a piece is an important factor. If it doesn't fit where it's going to go, then it's not going to work. Know? So I work with people a lot on size and aspect ratio and all that stuff. But once I'm into the meat of it, I present my ideas, and that's what we do if they go for them, which it's nice, you know. Of course, I still do a lot of work that I'm making the piece for myself. And then it's going to go to a venue of some sort. It's going to go to a gallery, or I'll take it to a show, or a gallery will take it to a show, and we'll just see what people think.
I think
that's always nice.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good conversation to have, because there are so many people who don't ever want to compromise their vision. It's like, this is what I do, take it or leave it. But here's kind of like working out the nuances of maneuvering your way into a field where there's a demand for something, and the demand is created from your work, from what you've designed, but then you can also expand maybe the technical aspects of how you create it so that you can get your work to where these people are showing it on these larger spaces, like in this hotel. Yeah. That's amazing.
I think so. What I'm looking for now is time.
Well, yeah.
Because, so often I think that like every human on Earth has just as many and as good of creative ideas as every other human on Earth. The difference is like stopping, pulling the car over, getting up out of bed, whatever it is, and writing it down or sketching it out or whatever, and then doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the difference. My greatest ideas, the things that actually, maybe could have been something and meant something. I mean, even on a larger historical, are way gone, lost in the cosmos. I had them while I was at a stoplight and then never thought of them again. Like, oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
And then, and then there it is, it's gone.
And then you're struggling to get it back. It's like, what?
I know I had my breakthrough idea at that gas station and then I can't. Okay. But I've gotten better about kind of making notes. If I see something beginning to happen in a piece or in a material, and I think, can I expand upon that? Can I take that as the root of a piece? I'll try to put it down. I'll try to put it down on something, some Post-it somewhere, some napkin with a scribble on it. Just kind of fill in a bucket with these just different concepts. 99% of them are just terrible ideas, but in there is the next thing. I'm really kind of relishing some time to explore some of those things now. That's where I'm at. I'm also happy that I'm busy right now and may have the means to be able to explore some of those things. If I get a slowdown here. I actually got a it felt kind of weird because it was the first time in my life it's ever happened. But I'd been working with a consultant on what could have been a pretty large project, like 4 by 8 foot installation going into a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd done some sketches and back and forth with them. And I hadn't heard in a couple of weeks, which isn't unusual. And I got an email the other day and I saw their name in the headline and thought, okay. And so opened the email and it was them letting me know that the client had gone a different direction.
Okay.
And my first just gut reaction was relief.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just lost the job or a job's not going to go through. And I'm kind of pretty good with that. I never felt, I was like, oh, good. Because when was I going to do that? That was coming right up.
It's hard to set those boundaries for ourselves because when the times are busy and good, we want to somehow make it happen because those don't always stick around.
No, man.
Yeah.
I know. And I can always remember the hungry times,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always walking a tightrope between being the stereotype of myself that I am and just wanting to be that stereotype. But one of the stereotypes is the starving artist, and I mean, we're all really good at what we do. And I know a lot of really super successful people in the field, but everyone's gone through tough times with it too, and so we've all, I think me especially, I've got that in my back pocket that I'm carrying around. I don't often say no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when that person called me and they said, yeah, we want one of those, we want 11 feet. And the first thing in my brain was, well, that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I said was absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
And then now we'll figure it out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, good times, bad times. I'm almost a shallow dip in business would be good coming up here. Give me some experimental freedom.
Well, when you talk about, the hard times in the back pocket or they're not too far from distant memory, I know that we all have troubles and tough times in our lives, but you really suffered a huge loss a number of years ago. And I don't mean to open up a raw wound or anything, but would you like to talk a little bit about what you experienced 7 years ago or so?
Sure. Well, I mean, this is the Independent Artist Podcast, so I'll tie it into that. Yeah, what you're referring to is when I was in Denver with my wife, and we had done the Cherry Creek Arts Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a great time and got to see a lot of really dear people to us. And then as we did every year after the show, we went and experienced some Western stuff, and went hiking up in the mountains, and storm rolled in quick. Lightning came, knocked us all out, and my wife didn't make it.
Yeah.
I mean, even now it's surreal when I tell that story. I have to stop and think, now, wait a minute, really? Did we really get struck by lightning?
It's such a bizarre, just such a random thing that it just seems it's so unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable that even happens. Anyway, I'm sorry, continue with your story.
No, it's okay. I just know that the important part and the way that the reason that this is, I think, pertinent to this discussion is that, and it's good timing in the discussion too. The thing about it was I was lucky in a lot of ways because growing up in my 20s, it was tough. Mm-hmm. And I did have a kiln made out of a dog cage, mm-hmm. and I was doing any show that would have me, and that was our only income, and I was really lucky that I had people around me that had complete faith in what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there were some pretty bottom of the barrel times, I mean, especially starting out.
A lot of sacrifices.
Early 90s or, late 90s they were lean, but it was a good life. Mm-hmm. And we made a family out there. We connected with artists all over the country. Mm-hmm. We began to realize that this is real and that this is kind of beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's a life, worth living, no matter how bad it got. And I'm sure you too know people along the way over the years that finally one day said, you know what? Can't do it anymore. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Family came to me and they said, listen, you gotta, this is dude, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you gotta, and now they're in logistics, or now which is, that's beautiful, because now they're doing just fine, I'm sure.
Right.
But I was lucky in that no matter how bad it got, I had this support at home of, no, just keep doing it.
You're on the right track.
No, this is the right,
yeah.
this is the right thing. Do this.
Yeah.
And so I did. And that's what got us there. And ultimately, it's what's gotten me here.
So are you saying that unconditional kind of acceptance and and love and encouragement that you felt from Becky before the accident, is that what kind of kept you going after? Because you had that?
I think so. I mean, I would tell people, it's been a while since I've kind of talked about it, but I would tell people, like, I've got to keep going, and I've got to make this something, because if I don't, all that she sacrificed and all that she put up with was in vain, because it was to get me to this point, to be able to do these things, and I've got to honor that. I've got to do those things. I have to.
That's beautiful.
And it's always a challenge. I mean, it's up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of sleepless nights still.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But it's, I think she'd be proud of what we're doing.
Definitely. I'm just so inspired by that determination to keep going. I don't know how I would handle it. None of us can really know when tragedy strikes how we're actually going to handle it till it's right in front of us. But, I think about, like the van accidents that some of our friends have had that have left them in bad shape, or studio fires, and all these things that our friends and you just put one foot in front of the other. COVID has been a killer for a lot of people, and people are still just getting out there and persevering, and I just am so inspired by that. And your story inspires me to keep working harder and to just keep doing it. So,
well, good.
Yeah. So
good.
I'm sorry you had to go through that. I mean, that's an awful thing to go through.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I do. I appreciate that.
I mean, it wasn't long after we were neighbors at one of our shows back in the day, and I got to know Becky and you very well. And man, she was delightful. I just enjoyed the whole weekend with you guys. And anyway, and when I heard about the accident, it was, and I'm sure a lot of us had the same reaction, like just disbelief.
Well, I'll tell you, let's talk about community some. I always knew I had a family of artists out there, but man, you don't understand the outpouring of that community, of our community, that I received and have received, in so many ways. But it truly let me know who my family was. Oh. It really did. And I'm happy and honored and lucky to know all of you people, and anyone that's listening, you know who I'm talking about.
They're sitting there at the other end of their phone, raising their hand, going, me.
It's you. I'm talking about you. Thanks.
Oh.
But, and you mentioned COVID, and that's, I mean, like, do we need to talk about COVID? Like, cause it's like, are we tired of,
are we tired of it yet? COVID? I'm tired of it.
I mean, but seriously though, I mean, like, it took a full year for it to catch up to me psychologically, to realize how much of my life it had changed. Because what we do is we make artwork solitarily for fun, and then we take it to huge groups of people all over the place,
breathing on us
for money, for an income, right? So COVID hits, like, oh sweet, I just get to go make stuff for fun, and then like 2 months later, you're like, well, but wait, what do you mean I can't come and sell it? I mean, it was absurd, and it, like I said, I was lucky enough to get get by just on a couple commissions that randomly came in that just sort of kept me strung along to get to finally when people would get vaccinated in large enough numbers to make a difference, and some shows would open up, and man, did they open up! I did a couple events, and boy, oh boy, after, all you have to do is skip one apparently, and the next one's super good.
But did the time off allow you the time to realize the scale on which you could make these pieces? Well,
I mean, still to this day, I'm working on one right now that's 4 by 6 feet. My next one is 13 feet long. But to this day, the biggest one I've ever done was like the third piece I ever made, in that style. Okay. It was maybe even a little more than third, but so a lot of it's been building a new studio, and trying to retool all that. I haven't had a day off in a long time.
What would you do with a day off anyway? You'd be like jotting down ideas at stoplights, for crying out loud. So
it's a day off. Man, I am such a lazy person, and that's the big struggle right there, because there's some of the stereotypes about being an artist that I fully live up to.
Okay.
And that is one of them. This 7-day a week, 8-hour a day, 10-hour a day thing it's interesting. It's the duality of man. Remember that scene from what was it? Full Metal Jacket, okay, where that Kubrick movie where the guy had on his war helmet, he had I think he had the word killer, and then right next to that word he had a peace symbol pin on it. And his sergeant said, what is that about? And he said it was the duality of man. And okay, that's me. I'm a hopelessly lazy. I want to lay around in a hammock and eat Doritos and, watch Star Trek. And instead I'm at it all the time. So that's been interesting.
It's the fear that we're going to turn into the person who stays in the hammock and never gets out of the Doritos. Yeah. So we stay busy to fight off that tendency.
Yep, I think you're right.
Well, Justin, I've kept you from your work long enough. I should probably let you go. This was an awesome talk, man. I really appreciate you and everything you're doing.
Well, you too. And I will be seeing you out there.
Yes, you will.
Somewhere warm and exotic, maybe, or somewhere.
For sure. Will and I have realized every time we go to wrap up one of these podcast episodes, it turns into a full 20-minute discussion of where are we going to see you next?
Yeah, right. And that's the thing.
That's the classic artist goodbye.
when after shows had been canceled for 2 years, basically, and then there was that first one, it was so funny talking to everyone, realizing everyone kind of, forgot how to do it. And I said, that first show back, they're going to need a 2-day setup. Because it's going to take us 1 day just to greet each other. Oh my God, how you doing? I mean,
and then there's you.
We're not going to get anything done. We're just going to be talking and milling around, and then
for sure.
So, well, this has been fun. I like to talk. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
You're right. And we'll see you down the road, man.
Okay. All right. We'll see you soon.
Cheers. You bet. Talk to you later, man.
Okay. See ya.
Incredible talk with incredible artist Justin Teilhet. Thank you so much for talking to him, Douglas. I'm a little jealous that you got to sit down and talk with him. I sure love to bend his ear whenever I see him at one of our shows.
How touching. It was such a real and honest talk at the end there about perseverance and just him sharing the tragedy he went through.
Yeah, that was a huge blow to our whole community. It just I was lucky enough to be their next door neighbor at Cherry Creek just the day before he lost Becky and before the community did. It just was, I didn't know if he was going to want to get into all of that, but I'm glad that he shared that. He's such a real dude. I just really appreciate him sharing his story.
Well, if anything, what he really instilled in me in that moment was to push through this current struggle that I'm dealing with physically. Right. That, when he comes back to, for him, thinking about the sacrifices that were made and the relationships that looked to him and said, you've got this, keep going, you can do this. that helped him continue on. And I've got that support from my partner and wife, my love, Renee. I've got that from friends. I've got that from my children. So I know I'll get on the other side of this, but sometimes it really can get in your head and it can just really just like, you know what I mean? Make things tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I found myself getting kind of emotional just imagining my own life kind of breaking down and changing like that. And it's a tough talk, but I appreciate him sharing his experience and her with us, you know?
Yeah, I really thank Justin for that.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to go back and get to work. Be nice to each other. Be especially nice to Reiko. If you're mean to her, we're going to be mean to you.
That's right. But we will use our words, we promise.
I'll slap the shit out of you.
All right, guys. See you down the road. Take care, everyone.
See you down the road.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigwithglass.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.